These are the LUSU FTO elections. I'm joined by David Grice, running for the Wellbeing Officer, a third-year English Lit student. So, can you tell me a bit about yourself, your manifesto, and kind of your experience both with your degree and kind of outside of your degree at the university?
Yeah. Hi, I'm David. I was recently on the Finesse JCR. I was the VP Wellbeing Campaigns Officer, and previously I was the International Officer of Finesse. Currently I'm involved with the International Students Forum, in which I'm the Vice Chair for JCRs. My role in all of those has been specifically catered towards students, especially towards international students has been a big focus of mine, but also, a more broader reach of student minorities, I suppose. Underprivileged students as well. It's something that I've really wanted to work on. Things that I've implemented within the college, for instance, include like the free period products is something that I've brought in within the college. It's something that Leah, my predecessor for VP Wellbeing Campaigns, brought in or tried to bring in through the usage of contacting the university and contacting the senior common room or like the college staff. But while they were able to get some success out of it, I just kind of went with a policy of just providing students with it with the JCR budget. So that's something that I kind of brought in directly. Specifically regarding my manifesto, there are 5 main policies that I want to work on. The first one is addressing the cost of living and rent. So it's a big thing that I've noticed that all the students who've experienced living on university, the prices have increased by so much. Especially since my first year, in which the prices have increased by about 14%, where the cheapest accommodation was around £129 per week. Currently, it's gone to a point where the cheapest accommodation is 138, with the average for shared accommodation being nearly 150. Those prices are getting to a point where it's unrealistic for students to be able to afford moving away from home, moving to a university, especially if they're not from around this area. They just have no motivation to come to Lancaster. And it's something that I really want to work on. Another policy that I have is that I want to implement training for bars, or ensuring that bars are compliant with student safety. It's a big thing I'm really passionate about. That since Freshers Week, it feels like bars feel almost unsafe for students, or students feel unsafe within these bars. And it's something that I really want to work on to ensure that bars are providing anti-spiking provisions, that they're providing like staff and security training to ensure that when students go to these bars, they will be safe at all times. I also want to work on incorporating welfare accessibility for societies and JCRs. Something that I noticed when I spoke to society execs and JCRs is that they don't know who to contact within LUSU when a welfare concern occurs. It was the same case for me during Freshers Week when we had a welfare concern, where I contacted Leah because fortunately I have good relations with Leah, the Wellbeing Officer. However, for a lot of other people, they don't have that privilege, and so it means that they don't know who to contact when things go wrong on socials, on bar crawls, on anything like that, and it's something that I really want to implement. And 2 of my smaller points that I didn't have a chance to clarify on in my manifesto is providing free period products across campus. It's something that Leah's been working on a lot, but it's something that I kind of want to implement as well, to encourage the university to keep doing that, but also to provide bins in all bathrooms, especially a big problem with gender-neutral bathrooms, where a lot of those bathrooms, the university seems to consider that they don't need bins, which is incredibly frustrating, because if they're gender-neutral bins, they're going to be students of both genders, or all genders, who are menstruating, and so we need to be able to provide bins. Otherwise, from speaking to a lot of students, they've had to carry them with them and put used period products in their bags and carry them with them, and they feel incredibly uncomfortable about that. And my final manifesto point is then also training student activists to empower their campaigns. Something that I really want to implement is ensuring that students can get involved with campaigns as much as they want to. If there's anything they're interested or passionate about, I really want to push them towards being able to get involved.
Yeah, great. Now, you mentioned obviously you were working on the Finesse JCR and working on the with the International Students Forum. How have those experiences helped kind of form? How have they kind of formed your time at the university, and how have they allowed you to kind of, I don't want to say necessarily develop, but how have they? What aspects of those roles have made you best suited for this role as Wellbeing Officer if you were elected?
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, as I kind of said previously, that working with Leah has helped me kind of get involved with a lot of campaigns, but also by being on the Finesse JCR, it meant that I was also friends with the previous Wellbeing Officer, Ella, both of which, they had a lot of campaigns they wanted to work on, and, were really successful in them. And by virtue of that, I then got involved with all those campaigns. I helped out as much as I could, whether that be getting involved with like the zero tolerance policy on sexual misconduct at the university, and getting involved with those protests, providing the free sanitary products within Finesse College, even helping out with the most recent World Food Festival, things like that. It meant that I have close links with the student union within the university, and so hopefully, if I get elected, I can then kind of use those close connections. It's the same with bars when we had to organise Freshers Week. All those links I can then utilise to ensure that students are protected at all times, whether they're on campus or whether they're in town. And that's, I think, a big priority within my role, hopefully, if I get elected as Wellbeing Officer.
Yeah. Now, moving on to your manifesto, one of your main points that you touch on is addressing the cost of living crisis and rent. Now, you specifically wanted to lobby the accommodation providers to try and ease financial pressure and ease the financial burden on students. Currently, there have been discussions already with the university, the Students' Union, who have seemingly been a bit more keen to kind of look at pricing restructures, whereas UPP, a separate contractor who I think control roughly 2/3 of the accommodation on campus, have had some encouragement, shall we say. The current plan, as far as I'm aware, whilst it is subject to obviously, a potential housing bubble bursting, but that is, pure speculation. The current plan is to increase some of UPP's more expensive accommodation and reduce the price of their more affordable accommodation. That way UPP, a company that needs to make money and make profit, maintains their profit margins, and the university can obviously then lower their accommodation on their more affordable accommodation as well, due to the fact that there's an agreement between the UPP and the Lancaster University. They can't, the university can't undercut and can't compete with UPP. Obviously, these have been very lengthy, long discussions, and so this kind of question to you is in two parts. Firstly, what do you think the feasibility is of being able to get UPP and the university back at a discussion table to possibly look at further reductions in rent and housing prices on campus? And if so, how would you further what's already been done, and is there anything you would do differently to what has already been done?
I think it's interesting that you touched on the UPP feeling slightly uneasy about taking on those initiatives, because what was mentioned at the most recent Union Assembly that Rory quoted from UPP was that even they stated the bubble will burst. The new Vice Chancellor has come in, and at Union Assembly he stated that there is a genuine problem with rent and the prices of rent that UPP and the university are both putting out. There's also there's a statement that Rory quoted from UPP about the bubble bursting, or the bubble will burst, from UPP, regarding how it's getting to a point where students feasibly cannot afford to live at university anymore. And I think Lancaster University, unfortunately, is not in a privileged position to be able to, to advertise, expensive prices and get away with it, which is, a good thing for students. But the problem is, it doesn't seem like the university is aware of that, because unlike a lot of city universities or universities close to cities, where students can afford to either live at home or can get away with living at home, I should say, or living around neighbouring cities in which they can then the transportation links are easier, so they can then travel to the university. Lancaster doesn't have those benefits, and instead, Lancaster as a city being quite small, a lot of students aren't going to be commuting in, and rather are going to be either living on campus or living in town. And because of both of those, the university needs to be aware that they can't get away with it anymore and that they need to implement change. The fact that, as I mentioned previously, the cheapest accommodation being 140, or nearly £140 per week, with the average being around 150 for shared bathrooms. I believe the ensuite is now £206 for next year. And that being a 14% increase since my first year in 2023 is, it's awful for students. And even when I was struggling to afford to live in shared bathrooms in my first year, it's so much worse now. And I think that the feasibility, I'm going to hope for as much change as possible, but I think the university is at a point now where they're even acknowledging themselves that they have to implement change, otherwise, students just won't be able to come to this university. But yeah, to then continue on that, there was, reading an article by the student union, they state that their contracts with UPP state that it's 1.5% increase on top of inflation each year. Which I agree, yeah, obviously they put that into the contract because it needs to reach those profit margins. However, it's in the university's best interest to implement change, because any rooms that the university doesn't fill, the university has to subsidise and pay UPP for. So if the university can negotiate with UPP to reduce those prices, to encourage students to, go to the cheapest accommodations, but also go to the most expensive ones that, aren't at the current price of nearly £280 per week. If those rooms aren't filled, that's an insane amount of money that the university is having to spend. And so, be able to kind of negotiate that between both parties alongside LUSU to ensure that students are then able to get through the cost of living that we're currently experiencing is something that I'm really passionate about, I really want to work towards.
Yeah. Great. Now, another one of the main points you've had is about protections for students within town. I think you particularly focus on anti-spiking provisions, kind of being almost, being encouraged, and alongside kind of staff and security training. On a kind of similar note, I just want to ask kind of, firstly, about kind of the feasibility and cost of this, certainly to bars in town, certainly when a lot of businesses are struggling as it is. And secondly, kind of almost the compliance, is there anything, how are we going to kind of ensure that this does happen, certainly at the very least amongst the popular bars, but at the very least, as many bars as we can, how are you going to try and ensure that there is compliance with this?
Yeah. I'll answer the latter question first, regarding compliance, that something that I noticed during Freshers Week, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because of a case that occurred during Freshers Week that I won't get into due to student confidentiality. However, there was a big welfare concern that occurred at one of the bars in town, and when we told the bars that we weren't going to be working with them, they immediately turned around and desperately wanted us to come back and work with them, and because for students, if they hear something negative, the same thing with LA1. When students hear something negative and it's publicised, students just don't go and refuse to, freshers especially, refuse to go because they feel like it's going to be unsafe. Mm-hmm. The compliance then comes into when all those bars recognise that risk that they have of losing customers, especially such important customers as students, especially when you notice that, over the breaks, they're empty, all the bars are empty. It should encourage these bars to join this, to join alongside other bars to ensure that they have anti-spiking provisions, that they have random security checks, that the staff and security have training to ensure that they're actually protecting students who have either been spiked or might be experienced hate crime, as international students or whether they're a part of the LGBTQ plus community. Anything like that, the bars, from what I've seen, the bars would be willing to comply. And I think that's the hardest. It is, that's quite a hard bit where, obviously, as you mentioned before about the cost, how we're going to be able to implement the training, how we're going to implement the cup covers or all the other different anti-spiking provisions that we could request from them. But I think it goes back to that same thing of if we speak directly to the bars and request them to implement the change using their own budgets, we can then advertise these bars to JCRs, to societies, not as a you can't use other bars that don't comply, but rather as a if you use these bars are safer. Will ensure that we're keeping track of any incidents that occur. Again, just to make sure that these bars are actually maintaining their safety and ensuring that students are actually feeling safe when they go on a night out. Because the one place that's, and I hesitate to use the word safest because there are still incidents like this that occur at Sugar House, but one of the safest places in Lancaster being the Sugar House is not a justification for the other bars not having all these these safety things implemented or these safety provisions implemented.
Yeah. And I think you previously touched on obviously other campaigns that the current, for example, Leah, the current wellbeing officer, has touched on. I think she mainly focused kind of on improving street lighting and making kind of town at night, certainly if you're going out for an evening and you're going to these bars, making it safer. Kind of on that note, similar-ish, have you got any other ideas for future campaigns that, if elected, that you would run, or is it the case that you would mainly focus on kind of anti-spiking provisions and staff training at bars?
I mean, that's my main focus, and obviously I don't want to kind of spread myself too thin and overpromise and underdeliver. However, Leah's campaign on street safety with street lighting is so important, and it's something that I'm trying to get as involved in as possible. And if they don't finish it by the end of their tenure, I'm more than happy to take that on and continue with that work, because I don't want that to fall to the wayside. I really want to, I don't want students to just feel safe when they're in those bars, but also when they're coming back from a night out, to make sure that they're able to get home safe. Speaking to local authorities as well, to ensure that they're safe on those, they're out, they're looking after students, ensuring they're protected. There are some other campaigns, well, not specifically campaigns, but things that I want to work on that I noticed which were concerns during Freshers Week, including someone on one of the nights out taking unsolicited photos of freshers. This was during, I think this was the first or second night of Freshers Week, and it was a big concern that I had when I noticed that this was happening, because students didn't notice that it was happening, but that's besides the point of the fact that this is a genuine security concern, and he claimed that he was doing it because the bars wanted it. We've not heard anything from the bars since, and I really want to make sure that by introducing staff and security training, especially within bars, but then also increasing local authorities or speaking to local authorities to keep their awareness up on all those different policies. I know that Leah's spoken to the council or to the council police regarding safety concerns in town. To kind of continue that as well would be something that I really want to look towards if I get elected.
Now, another one of the things you've touched on in your campaign is welfare accessibility for societies and JCR. Specifically, I think you said there have been previous issues with the kind of reporting process. Briefly, can you kind of go over what is wrong with the reporting process currently, and how, if elected, would you aim to fix and change it so that it would function better from your perspective? And kind of as an aside to this, is there anything additional you would do to support the reporting process? For example, more or better resources or further training?
Yeah. Something that I've noticed when speaking to society execs is that there's this university process called UniSafe. It's the way that a lot of execs report any welfare concerns that have occurred. But there are many issues with it. One thing I've noticed is that if students report it anonymously, it doesn't get dealt with. They claim on their website that it's dealt with in 1 working day. I've never heard that happen. A lot of the times when exec members report a certain welfare case has occurred, the exec specifically don't hear back about it. And all 3 of those issues are indicative of failing within both the university and the student union regarding their ability to deal with big welfare concerns that could occur for students. And I think the biggest worry that I have as well is that when society execs report these things, they're not, the university might be slightly blamed for it, but the execs who have reported that, who haven't then gotten any help for people who've approached them, also get into the firing line. And it's something that I want to implement to ensure that, I want to provide execs with a clear guideline of who to triage certain things to. So, the way that I've often tried to explain this is regarding students feeling homesick. If they feel homesick, obviously that's still an important issue, but if we can, triage that to the college CAT team, for instance, and make sure the execs are able to contact them and help them with that. But then on the other side, if it's a welfare concern that's occurred on a social, making sure that there are specific direct lines of contact, whether it's during Freshers Week or on a Wednesday evening, making sure that there's that one person there in the student union who can immediately respond to calls or immediately respond to messages to help deal with that then and there, because otherwise you're having to wait until the morning or even later. And it's a genuine worry that I have, and I really want to implement advertising office hours for staff within LUSU to make sure that if things like that do occur, students can then drop in to the student union, speak to a certain member of staff and say, this is something that's happened, where do I get the help from? And they can then be triaged accordingly. And that's something that I really, hopefully I can bring in if I get elected.
Yeah. Now, very briefly, so obviously you've had your other points that you couldn't quite expand upon,
Yes.
including training students for better activism and campaigning, and also kind of the expansion of free period product across a lot more of the campus and making it a lot more visible across campus, because I think at times a lot of people don't necessarily know where they can access it on campus. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of expand on it a bit briefly, a bit more on those kind of 2 points.
Yeah. With the first point regarding student activism, something that I've noticed this past academic year is that there haven't been many, or there have been barely any protests on campus. There have not been many visible campaigns, and it's a big problem that when speaking to a lot of activist societies, they've stated that they don't know how to campaign, that they've not been taught how to campaign. They don't know they don't know where they are, and they don't know how to get involved. And that's the same thing with, if student activists aren't able to get involved, it then means that, the average student body, the general student body, isn't going to have a clue. And fortunately, I've been in a good position where I've had those links with the student union, and I can get involved with those campaigns. But that shouldn't be based on, the people that I know, but it should be, advertised. It should be general, that anyone who's interested can then get involved. And yeah, I'm hoping to implement different things, like whether that be training, whether that be in-person training for student activists, or also providing networking events with, similar like-minded groups. So, the Women's Plus roles, like Feminist Society, Women Plus in Sport, Women Plus in Politics, or like international societies, where they can all come together and, discuss, different things that they're passionate about and things they want to bring in to the university, and ways they want change. And obviously, I'm more than happy to sit in on those networking sessions and in fact organise them to ensure that campaigning can be built from students directly, and that they'll have the encouragement, the endorsement of the student union, but also being able to organise it from the ground up themselves. And something that I really want to work towards and implement within the university. On your second point regarding period products, kind of what I mentioned earlier, I think Leah has done such a good job at bringing in period products to nearly all the bathrooms across campus, and I think we're now at a point where once those period products are brought in, the big concern is then the bins or lack thereof, especially in gender neutral bathrooms, but also in a lot of women's bathrooms. They don't all have bins, even though it should be I'm pretty sure it is a regulation, and so a lot of menstruators feel uncomfortable having to carry around used period products with them because there isn't a bin that they can throw things away, or the bins haven't been emptied, and they feel really uncomfortable about that. And it's something that I really want to make sure that if I get elected into this role, that continuing the work that Leah's already done in making sure that period products are provided for all students, but also then that there's also bins provided so that they can also dispose of them afterwards.
Yeah. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, one of the things that the Curriculum Transformation Programme has kind of highlighted has been, at least from my perspective, a quite alarming lack of communication between the Students' Union, students and the university. Now, while I think the new Vice-Chancellor is more eager and a lot more willing to communicate and sit in on things like Union Assembly and other meetings and be a lot more communicative, there is still a lot more progress, I think, that could be made. My question to you is this: how would you help improve communication links and improve discussions between these kind of three bodies and three groups?
Yeah. Obviously, as the unlike the president who gets to sit in on set, the Wellbeing Officer has the opportunity to, if I get chosen within the student union itself, to sit on Senate, and it's definitely something I'd like to do to make sure that I have that voice to the Vice Chancellor to ensure that the student union has that platform to be able to express views, as the body of the students. I want to be representative, and it's why I've had so many meetings with JCRs, with societies, to make sure that there is that clarity there of, I'm not doing this role for my own sake, but I'm doing it for the sake of students who want that change, when they can have it. And obviously it's going to be a difficult thing because, as you even said, the Vice-Chancellor has come in with a lot more positive mindset than we all expected, and from what we've seen from the university, especially from the higher up staff who've not really been very communicative. And in fact, even the Vice-Chancellor admitted that the university's gone to a point now where it's almost gone the complete other way, where it used to be very, all the different bodies used to kind of communicate with each other, whereas since he left, he felt as though it's now a top-down, where anything that the staff, the head staff of the university say, that's what goes. And I kind of want to make sure that there is that level playing field where JCRs have that voice, especially wellbeing officers have that voice to be able to discuss well-being issues, but then also that societies, especially activist societies, are able to then also come in and explore what they want to deal with. And it's a big thing that I really want to improve, that communication between the student union and the students, and therefore by doing so we can then explore how we can then discuss it with the university itself and with the Vice-Chancellor.
Yeah. Now, finally, is there anything else you want to highlight, either about yourself and you running for Wellbeing Officer, or about your manifesto in particular?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern that I've noticed, especially with this election period, is the lack of candidates. And I know that's not really that's not really indicative of my own application for well-being, but it's more, I'm hopeful that, you know, if I get elected within this role, that hopefully there's a way to bring in, you know, more passion for student politics, to ensure that, you know, obviously the FTO so far have showcased that there is genuine change that can be implemented within the university, but kind of translating that to the extent of which, all roles are contested, all roles have candidates who are, you know, suitable for it, and I think, you know, I want more students to apply for those roles, because the Vice-Chancellor reads all the manifestos, and, you know, if the Vice-Chancellor can at least hear student voices and different student voices, rather than, you know, people like me who were on a JCR who have kind of been trained in that kind of like the LUSU way. Instead, if we can have, you know, new students who are coming in and wanting to campaign and wanting to get involved, you know, whether that be within LUSU elections themselves or even campaigns, I'm really hopeful that like that's something that I can bring in to make sure that, you know, LUSU is a body of which students want to get involved with, and not something that they want to, or they don't want to run for. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. That obviously that has nothing to do with myself, but it's more so it's something that I want to kind of, you know, implement in the next year if I get elected.
Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much for the interview, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.